This past weekend, I got to see Over Your Dead Body. It's an action, dark comedy thriller directed by Jorma Takano, who most people may know from his time on SNL, and the comedy trio The Lonely Island. It's written by Nick Kosher and Brian McKelway. It's an American remake based on a Norwegian film called The Trip. It stars Jason Segel and Samara Weaving as this dysfunctional married couple who retreats to a secluded cabin to repair their relationship, but each secretly plot to murder the other. Now, if that little excerpt right there doesn't at least get you a bit interested in the film, I really don't know what will. This will be a spoiler-free review, and let me know down in the comments if you've seen Over Your Dead Body, what you thought of it if you have, or if you're interested in seeing the movie. Now let's just jump straight into my review. Starting off with the good, and I have a lot of good things to say about this movie, but for starters, the chemistry between Jason Segel and Samara Weaving as this messed up married couple who have had it to their limits with each other is excellent. From the moment they first interact, you could tell both of them are just fed up and can't wait to execute their plans. When they both try to be friendly and not whine to strangle each other, you can just see how hard it is for them, which is very entertaining. Even when Dan, Jason's character, is doing something nice for Lisa, Samara's character, by cooking her favorite meal, during the meal, she just comes out and says that it's not her favorite meal, and her favorite meal is something that he's never seen her eat, talk about, or anything for that matter. So during the whole conversation, you can start to see the frustration in Dan's eyes start to really build up. Like, wow, I can't wait for this to be over. This was the last quote unquote nice thing I was going to do for you, and you just tell me that out of the blue. In his warped state of mind, him doing this last meal that was her favorite was him kind of trying to find peace with what he's going to do, and she just kind of ripped that away from him. So he doesn't even get to be, in his mind, a quote unquote nice person for trying to make her last meal enjoyable for her. And when Dan is finally going to commit the act, you can feel the hesitation in Dan because he doesn't know if he can actually go through with it. And right when he's about to chloroform her, Lisa just turns around and tases him, flipping everything that we know up until that point. If you didn't know what the movie's premise was, you're kind of like, well, that just happened? What? So then we get this great back and forth between Dan and Lisa when she's interrogating him on what the chloroform was for, why he brought a bag of rocks to his boat, and why he has a rope and a saw. And he's making up all these excuses like, oh, just for hunting, for fixing stuff up in the house, oh, for cleaning the windows, yada yada yada, right? And then Dan, once the saw brings brought up, he starts asking her why did she bring a taser and why was she ready to use it on him. They start playing off each other really well right there. This movie does something I really like where every 20 minutes or so we're kind of transported back into time to learn more of what's actually going on. The movie starts off with Dan setting up that Lisa really wants to go for a hike in the mountains by herself, and there's this really bad storm happening that's supposed to happen on Sunday when she's supposed to go out, and he's telling people that, like, oh, I've been telling her not to go. So then Lisa starts to tell Dan her story and that she's done the exact same thing as he's been doing, telling people that Dan wants to go hunting with her, and you just never really know what can happen with hunting. Lisa doesn't want to go. She doesn't even like guns. Anything can happen when you go hunting. This is a nice callback to the opening right before Lisa and Dan first interact with each other. Lisa's friend goes past Dan and she says, good luck hunting, Dan. Dan's really thrown off by that comment. He's like, hunting? What do you mean hunting? This is just a thing that continually happens throughout the rest of the movie, all the way until the final act. You never know what's going to happen next, and there are small details that happen throughout the opening of the movie that come back later during other sequences that go back to the past. You're like, oh wait, that's a nice little setup for something that doesn't matter in the moment, but then it actually foreshadowed what's happening later in the movie. It's just something I really like in movies. It makes subsequent viewings of it a lot more interesting to see. Be like, oh yeah, that's how this happens. That just plays into each other really well, and I just really like all those scenes and how the movie does that. Some movies get that really wrong, but this one plays that really well in my opinion. Halfway through the film, we're then introduced to our main antagonist. There's this guy named Pete, played by Timothy Oliphant, Todd, played by Keith Jardine, and Algeria, played by Juliette Lewis. All of them are played really well and do a great job at keeping up with both Jason and Samara when they're introduced into the movie. These three have a really funny running gag going on when the three intruders capture both Dan and Lisa. That keeps on happening throughout the rest of the movie, and I just really liked it. It's a simple gag of not wanting to know their names, so whatever they end up doing to them isn't as emotional because they don't have their real names, right? So how can they really care what happens to them? So they give them two names that have nothing to do with them at all. So they just a funny gags. Every time they talk to them, they're just talking about their fake names. I enjoyed it a lot because Dan and Lisa are talking to each other with their real names, but then they just refer to them as us. Let's say Mario, right? It's not Mario, but I could just say what it is, but it's kind of funnier not knowing what the names are. It's just a good little gag that continues. So then we learn Todd and Pete are escaped convicts who were held by Algeria, who's a correction officer, right? We learn both Pete and Todd are both convicted killers, so that already makes them a serious threat other than them escaping from prison, right? But then you have Allegra, who you could probably think is potentially she was tricked into helping them, but we're quickly shown that she is just as bad as the other two. I'm not going to go into why she is now, since I talk about that later in what I think is bad section of the movie, but what we learn that she and the other correctional officers did with the prisoners and threatens to do with Dan so she and the guys can get what they want, it's really despicable. And while she's not a physical threat like Todd and Pete, she's just as messed up as them, and she should not be taken lightly. So it's good that they didn't try to make her seem like the helpless person who was tricked into helping them. No, she's in it for the long haul. She's not as bad, but what she does is despicable and could be argued on the same level as Pete and Todd. Once the five really start to interact, that's when you get a lot of more physical humor going on. It's not super all-out slapstick comedy, but it gets close at times, and I really like when live action movies go for that kind of style. You don't really see a lot of it happening. They're more grounded. Oh yeah, this can actually happen. But this movie goes the opposite end of that. It says, oh yeah, this stuff can happen, but it's just some of the most absurd things. You're not thinking like, whoa, why think they actually went there, right? And for my opinion, them going that more outlandish route really helps make it more palatable for people who don't like the over-the-top brutality that this movie can get to at points, which you're not really expecting because of how lighthearted it kind of takes it with the premise it has. But once that all starts happening, it does get pretty brutal at times, and just because of the outlandish nature, I would definitely say it is easier for people who aren't into that to accept it and enjoy it. There's one more thing I want to talk about. It's kind of a spoilery thing. It pertains to the ending, so I'm not going to talk into great detail about it, but I just want to talk about it because it's the last thing that I really enjoyed about the movie. I thought it was a great ending. So if you want to skip to my mixed thoughts, there's a timestamp down in the comments, but it's not going to be that long anyway. So without getting into too much detail, they really start to make fun of the trend of people using a tragedy to catapult themselves into the spotlight and capitalize on their own tragedy. They do it in a way that's like, oh yeah, this is a real thing people do. They turn these tragic moments that are awful, horrible, that didn't really be out there for the world to see, but they take that and they use it to help themselves. And this is a trend that's been happening more and more recently. You see a lot of people be in all these messed up situations, then you see them getting somehow a career out of it, which isn't always bad. Like, hey, if you can help yourself get over what happened to your trauma by doing this, they take it to the extreme where like, oh yeah, they're banking on everything. But yeah, everything else about this movie really works for me. It's just a great time, man. Like, it really is. This movie is so good. Moving on to the mixed aspects, I don't really have much mixed on this movie personally, but your enjoyment of this movie is going to come down to how much you vibe with the style of humor that it's going for. Dark humor isn't for everyone, so if you know that you don't like dark humor, then this movie isn't going to work well for you. Not all of its humor is dark, but the vast majority of what it's going for with the absurd premise of the movie itself, you just know that most of its humor is going to be revolving around that. Right? And also, the movie is very brutal, so once it gets towards the middle of it, and it really doesn't hold back at all. You don't feel like it's going to be that way because of how the movie starts and how lighthearted it takes its premise of a wife and husband both planning to kill each other. You don't expect the action to get as mean and brutal as it does. But once the action starts to happen, I could see tonal whiplash happening for some viewers just because of how absurd it gets and how actually like you're wincing at the kind of brutality that happens on screen at some points. So those are the only two things I can see some people being turned off by this movie. Moving on to the bad, there's not really much I dislike about this movie. Everything really works well for me, but towards the middle of the movie, there's this one scene that gets really dark, and before I go into describing why this doesn't work for me, I'm going to leave a timestamp in the comments so that you can skip to my final thoughts if you don't want to hear this, but I will say it does get to a point where I don't know if this really works. The timestamp will be down below, but yeah, let's just get right into it. So there's a scene that I said like towards the middle of the movie, and it starts off pretty tame with Pete. He's trying to interrogate the married couple about giving them all their money, and both Dan and Lisa, they're saying they have no money. So Allegra chimes in and tells Pete to leave this to her. So she starts off being nice and all that, but then she starts talking about this game that she and her other guards would have the inmates play down in the washing rooms at night where nobody could hear them. Pretty much a fighting game, right? And you really don't want to be the loser of this game. I'm not going to say what happens, but there's a joke that happens at men's prisons where you just don't drop the soap, right? It plays into that. So the loser, yeah, you can see where that goes. Right? So Allegra then makes Dan play this game with Todd. As you could probably tell, it doesn't really go well for Dan at all. And with Jason Segel's performance during all this, he's begging not to play his game. He doesn't want to die. He doesn't want what's potentially going to happen to him. It really gets at you. It makes you feel dirty for watching it. Scene ends with a joke about Todd not being able to do it because of him getting shot just scene or two ago. Right? That just it just doesn't sit well with me. I think there's a version of this scene where it's shorter. It's not as intentional with what it's trying to do. I just think there's a scene where this is shorter. It's not as dark. Jason Segel can still have his great performance. I think the scene that we're given, it just goes too far. Over Your Dead Body is funny, brutal, and just a fantastic time at the movies. If you're someone who's tired of all the sequels, prequels, and reboots of long-term franchises, you need to go support this movie. While this is a remake, I think this has a lot more to offer you than any of the franchise films coming out later this year. This was easily one of the best theater experiences I've had in a long time. If you can, I would highly recommend getting a group of your friends to go see this movie. Get as many people as you can, and you'll all be laughing, gasping, and just having a great time. Over Your Dead Body gets a 10 out of 10 from me, and this is one of the biggest surprises so far of the year, and one of the best I've seen as well. Thank you all for watching, and have a great rest of your day.